that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Happy to be with you. Well, the first topic is House Resolution 1, which I call Legislating the Constitution Away. On Friday, the Congress did pass a bill. Let me back you up a little bit, and let's talk about the Equal Citizens Organization, using Lawrence Lessig as a spokesman. Back in December of 2018, he spoke about how important H.R. 1 was for the America he believed that we should be.
20 years ago today, an extraordinary woman began an extraordinary walk. Doris Haddock, a.k.a. Granny D, an 88-year-old woman from New Hampshire, began a walk in Pasadena, California, and for the next 13 months walked 3,500 miles to arrive in Washington, D.C. on February 29th, 2000. And across that walk, on her chest, was a sign that said, Campaign Finance Reform. Now, what Granny D saw 20 years ago is something that most of us just missed. That's the way in which the cronies and special interests had captured our government and made it impossible for us to achieve anything important so long as they were at the helm. And what she saw was that we had to find a way to end that corruption if we were going to get our democracy back. So it's extraordinarily fitting that on this 20th anniversary, our Congress is going to consider the most important civil rights legislation in our lifetime. This bill, referred to as H.R. 1, is the most fundamental reform of our political system since the Civil War. This bill would establish public funding of congressional elections. It would end partisan gerrymandering in the states. It would establish automatic voting registration. It would restore the Voting Rights Act. It would establish an extraordinary system of ethics to keep those congressmen focused on what their constituents want rather than what the lobbyists want. This reform would be everything Granny D walked across this country to achieve. Now, you've probably not heard about this bill, H.R. 1, and you've not heard about it because the mainstream media thinks there's no chance it would ever pass. And of course, so long as Mitch McConnell is the head of the United States Senate, it would never pass because Mitch McConnell loves the corrupted system that we have right now. But it is extraordinarily important that we build a movement across this country to support fundamental reform like H.R. 1. And what we are doing is building a campaign right now to make sure that this bill is not just a Democrat's bill, but a Republican's bill too. We want to find in the next 6 weeks 10 congressmen to co-sponsor that bill who are Republicans, and one senator to agree to co-sponsor a similar bill in the United States Senate. Because if we could show this was a bipartisan effort, then we could begin to crack through the attention deficit that this political system pays to this fundamental question of reform. But that just tees up the most important challenge that we have. Because as we enter the 2020 presidential election cycle, the most important thing for us Democrats to stay focused on is an issue that all of America is deeply invested in solving, and that is this corrupt political system. The president spoke about draining the swamp. That slogan was actually Nancy Pelosi's before he picked it up and started using it. But what that means is that this issue is an issue that unites America. It doesn't divide America. And so what we in the Democratic Party need to do is to make sure that the candidates running for president have committed to making this reform fundamental and first. And so we will be asking every candidate running for president who expects to win in the primary in Granny D's state to commit fundamentally to making this reform the first issue they press in 2021. We need you to help us in this campaign. We need you to spread the message and start spreading the hashtag #FixItFirst. Because unless we build a movement that demands the politicians give us our democracy back, they're going to be happy to sell it to the highest bidder. Granny D was an extraordinary American. She has inspired a generation of activists. In her honor, join us in this fight. Thank you very much.
Stirring words that really don't have any meaning. What you want people to believe is that nationalizing state elections, and for those who do not realize that, every election for a federal office in this country is not a federal election, it is a state election. So when you say automatic voter registration, are you dictating to the states how they're going to run their... Yes, you are. This comes under the mantle of our democracy, which the founders did not give us. They gave us a constitutional republic. You are now looking to exchange that for democracy that says the states and the governors and the state legislatures, they have no power once the Congress decides to act. You know, we did this once before in our history. It was called Reconstruction, and that did not turn out well. As any student of history will tell you, Reconstruction was a disaster. It had moments, but it was, quote unquote, a forced solution. And as the saying goes regarding the South, I'm not trying to defend the South for their biases, but this is a simple truth. A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. Reconstruction tried to instill the values of Northern liberals, and that's what the Republicans represented back in the 1860s. The radical Republicans in Congress wanted to impose those values upon the South by way of the bayonet. They occupied the South. And the South went along with it for a while. And then the same Democratic policies and politicians who were in charge of the South before the war began took it over within less than 10 years. Less than 10 years of the Civil War's ending. Doesn't work. But like all other liberal ideas, the fact that it didn't work doesn't convince them that it doesn't work. It just means the right people didn't try. So here they are again. The other thing that, I gotta say this, they believe, oh, we're going to put in a system of ethics. Excuse me, laws don't make ethics. Laws just make ethics violations. Ethics are simply a matter of who you choose to elect, not the laws in place to govern them. If you want ethical operation of government, why don't you put ethical people into office? That's the answer. Well, despite all that, let's get past some of that. On the 8th of March, this is what occurred, and here's some of the fallout because of it.
The Democratic-controlled House voted this morning to pass H.R. 1 along party lines. Democrats say the bill is designed to protect voting rights, make it easier to register and vote, and provide greater transparency for campaign financing.
But as our Washington correspondent Alexandra Limon reports, the plan is unlikely to become a law.
The bill is passed.
House Democrats passed H.R. 1, the For the People Act, along party lines.
H.R. 1 restores the people's faith that government works for the public interest. The people's interest, not the special interest.
The package of bills is designed to change the election system. It requires political donors to be public and changes rules for political ads and PACs.
I am a former CIA officer, and the role of foreign governments and foreign entities in our elections is just abhorrent.
H.R. 1 also takes on government ethics. It seeks more oversight of elected officials, including requiring tax returns for presidents and vice presidents. And for voters, it creates automatic voter registration, makes Election Day a federal holiday, and prohibits partisan gerrymandering and voter roll purges.
Republican lawmakers say they too want to make it easier for people to vote and say the federal government does have a role in things like election security, but they strongly oppose H.R. 1 and call it government overreach.
40% of this bill has not even been marked up.
H.R. 1 misuses taxpayer dollars, takes power away from the states to administer their own elections, and threatens to limit Americans' constitutional rights.
The White House says H.R. 1 micromanages elections, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says the Senate will not vote on H.R. 1. In Washington, Alexandra Limon.
Harking back to Mr. Lawrence Lessig's word, we need to make this a bipartisan. It's not bipartisan. The last time the Democrats did something like this, it was 2010. It was called Obamacare. What happened to Obamacare? It's now unconstitutional. This is even less constitutional than Obamacare. You're basically telling the states, we don't like the way you run elections. We're going to do it for you. We're going to make voter registration automatic. Everybody's going to vote in your state who the federal government says should vote, even though it is up to states to determine who is eligible to vote in those elections. There are certain limitations. You can't discriminate because of race. You cannot discriminate because of gender. But there's a whole lot of reasons why you would not want someone to vote other than the color of their skin or whether or not they have a Y chromosome. Plenty of reasons. But now what you want to do is say that's not the case. We don't want to deal with that. Oh, by the way, one thing you haven't heard yet, so far in all this, you didn't pick up what appears in the bill on page 39 of 444 pages. It takes 444 pages to make things right. Sure it does. Treatment of individuals under 18 years of age. This is dealing with the voting section. A state may not refuse to treat an individual as an eligible individual for purposes of this part on the grounds that the individual is less than 18 years of age at the time a contributing agency receives information with respect to the individual, so long as the individual is at least 16 years of age at such time. In other words, 16-year-olds can vote. I don't know why they left that out. Well, actually, I know why they left it out of the news reports. Because if you really want to stoke public opinion against something, tell them people who can't even drive in certain states are now eligible to vote. Passed along party lines. I want to give some spin on this. Not my spin, I'll do that at the end, but some spin. Roland S. Martin, who is in my mind one of the most, if not the most biased person of color to ever grace public airwaves, had this to say the day after the bill passed.
The House passed H.R. 1. That is a bill dealing with democracy reform. The first time in a very, very long time. What does it include? Automatic voter registration, nationwide early voting, public financing of elections, into congressional gerrymandering, and the release of Donald Trump's taxes. Now, Republicans in the Senate are already saying they're going to oppose this. Mitch McConnell says he's not even going to bring it up. Teresa, there's a reason Democrats wanted this to be the first bill that they pass in control of the House.
It's full transparency. We already went through the first 4 years of not seeing Donald Trump tax returns. We went through 4 years of voter suppression in some states. And so as it comes up on the next term, if he's elected or if he's defeated, transparency is going to be at the utmost of the conversation that everybody's going to be talking about, and Maxine Waters will be delivering on her promise that she stated earlier.
Joseph, when you look at this particular bill here, Republicans are already saying, "Oh, how dare we have, taxpayer finance congressional races?" They're saying that you're taking powers away from the state. I saw one statement from a member of Congress who was from Tennessee, where their Secretary of State is already saying, "Absolutely, we're going to oppose this." And so now it's states' rights, states' rights, states' rights. We control voting. What are you doing?
Well, it's an echo back to an earlier time where states' rights meant, was not even code word for, trying to restrict the vote from African Americans. And certainly in this case, it looks like the Republicans are fighting this so much because they're losing in the marketplace of ideas. I mean, basically, a lot of what they're proposing as a legislative body is not really that popular with the people, and the Democrats are outvoting. And certainly in the midterms election, you had a record turnout in Barack Obama's 2 years, same thing. Hillary Clinton brought the vote but did not win. So they're seeing the handwriting on the wall. And if you're not certain that you're going to win the game, you try to rig the rules.
And also, Fatima, look, here's the thing that you have to also look at. So someone sent me earlier, they said, I don't understand why the Voting Rights Act wasn't in this. Here's why I think so. I think it wasn't in here because by separating the two, Republicans could easily say, you know what, I'm cool with these two, but I don't like these three. So Congresswoman Terry Sills introduced H.R. 4. And I think by separating with the VRA, you're going to force Republicans to be on the record. Am I going to vote specifically against fixing the VRA? When they had the news conference announcing it, it passed 98-0 in the Senate. George W. Bush was president, sign it into law. I think Democrats want to be able to compare, here are all the Republicans who were here, who voted for it, who would now oppose it. So I think that's why they separated those two.
They're each also worthy of their own separate and deep conversation. What's happening with our democracy right now is core and it's fundamental. And when you talk about the states complaining that they don't have the power is going back to the people to be able to vote and see the type of people who represent them. And we've seen with this new Congress what it can look like when you have a more diverse Congress, when you have the largest number of women in history, and we have the largest number of black women serving in history. It's International Women's Day, so I feel like it should bring.
I understand. I got you. I saw you work that thing in. But Teresa, here again, McConnell's not going to bring it up, and I think what you have here are Democrats knowing that, and what they're doing is they're setting the stage to be able to run ads during the election in 2020, saying they voted against automatic voter registration, they voted against this, they voted against this, and that's what they're setting up.
Good, and they should be setting those type of platforms up and those type of messages up immediately. Because, again, the base is still trying to figure out, and I'm talking about some of the millennial bases and some of the young professional bases, are trying to figure out what to do next and who to follow. And nobody's catching their attention right now. So it's really going to take, not only this bill, but a lot more engagement in order to really try to craft what that looks like and make it a power pack fit in order to get some of those voters out.
So, no purging of voter rolls, which is an excellent way to commit election fraud, leaving people who don't vote, haven't voted on the rolls so that their names can be attached to ballots that were not cast by them and then utilized in determining who actually wins an election. No gerrymandering. So what you're saying is the states cannot determine for themselves what their congressional districts look like. Why not? And they can't do that by whoever is in elected office at the time when they choose to redraw those districts. Why not? Oh, because you don't like it. Because despite what they're saying about, the Republicans are losing in the marketplace of ideas, we still have a heck of a lot of Republican governors. The vast majority, or a landslide majority, so to speak, of state legislatures are controlled by the GOP. And that happened while Barack Obama was president, because when he entered the presidency in 2009, the majority of governors were Democrats, and the majority of state legislative chambers were controlled by Democrats. That all switched while he was in office. Tell me what that means about missing in the marketplace of ideas. Who's actually missing? Is it the GOP who controls, or is it the Democrats who have gone to something even worse than gerrymandering? You're worried about gerrymandering on a state level. How about gerrymandering on the level of the nation? We're telling you about early voting. We're telling you about automatic voting. We're taking all this out of here because we're going to take everything. And of course, there's the 16-year-old vote. We're going to take everything that works in the Democrats' favor and make that federal law so that no state can push back against it. And then we're going to say, if you oppose this, you're for a corrupt system. Excuse me, you want to put in place a corrupt system. And as far as public funding of campaigns, you're now saying that the taxpayer involuntarily pays for political advertising with which they do not agree. Well, it's just fair. No, it's not fair. It's not about fairness. It's about liberty. If you're going to let somebody be at liberty, you do not take their money and force them to spend it in a way in which they would not. I don't want public funding of political campaigns. The current president didn't use much public money in his campaign at all. But he won because his ideas were preferable to the electorate. That's the way it works, folks. Of course, this is a good one for me. A federal holiday for elections? Why do I need to have a federal holiday? Because first of all, just because it's a federal holiday doesn't mean that the people who are voting are going to be able to take that day off. Guess what? There are federal holidays now that a significant number of those who work in the private sector do not get to take, unless they're willing to burn a day of vacation or sick leave on it. How is creating another day? Oh, it helps the government workers who overwhelmingly vote Democrat. Oh, the theme keeps showing up, or if you haven't noticed it. Also, there's the continued mention of, well, for our democracy. That's code word for subverting the Constitution. That is code word for removing liberties, because no one is at liberty in a democracy. A true democracy, no one is at liberty. Only the majority has liberty. Anyone who is not in the majority has no liberties at all. And they brought up, well, we can see what happened. We have a more diverse Congress. Yes, we see socialism. We see anti-Semitism. We see that now in this most diverse Congress. And it's happening on the side where the diversity has shown up among the women in the Democrat Party. Wow. They brought up both the news reports and Mr. Martin brought up, this isn't going anywhere in the Senate. McConnell says we're not even going to vote on this. This is going to die on the vine. And Mitch McConnell, back at the end of January, toward the end of January, gave a speech in the Senate chamber speaking on H.R. 1. He gave it a different name than what the Democrats give it. And he laid out what his objections seemed to be with regard to it.
Now, Mr. President, on an entirely different matter, I spoke for the first time yesterday on the subject that House Democrats have crowned their signature effort for this Congress, H.R. 1, also known as the Democratic Politician Protection Act. Speaker Pelosi and her colleagues are advertising it as a package of urgent measures to save American democracy. What it really seems to be is a package of urgent measures to rewrite the rules of American politics for the exclusive benefit of the Democratic Party. Yesterday, I gave a brief tour through several of the most bizarre components of their proposal. Today, I'd like to focus on just one of the legislation's major victims, the American taxpayer. H.R. 1 would victimize every American taxpayer by pouring their money into expensive new subsidies that don't even pass the laugh test. In several new ways, it would put every taxpayer on the hook to line the pockets of candidates, campaigns, and outside consultants. Do you look forward to bumper stickers, robocalls, attack ads, and campaign mail that descend on the country in seemingly endless cycles? Speaker Pelosi must think you do, because she wants you to pay for these things with your tax dollars. You get the opportunity with your money to pay for attack ads and bumper stickers and the rest. This bill creates brand new government subsidies both for political campaign donors and for the campaigns themselves. The federal government would start matching political donations the same way some employers match gifts to charity. You'd be literally funding attack ads for the candidates you disagree with. How about that? Your money funding ads for the candidates you disagree with. Maybe that's why every Democrat opposed our tax cuts for middle-class families and small businesses. They were counting on that money to pull off this stimulus package, if you will, for campaign consultants. And for what reason? To increase competition? Well, studies have shown that incumbents win just as often in taxpayer-funded elections as they do when campaigns are funded with private money. To reduce corruption? Hardly. Jurisdictions that have toyed with taxpayer-funding political systems have turned out to be replete with misappropriation, personal use, straw donors, and public corruption scandals. So I remain curious why exactly the Democratic Political Protection Act wants to offer the American people's money to thousands of candidates that run for the House of Representatives every 2 years, whether they support these candidates or not. They want citizens to bankroll political materials that they totally disagree with. But they aren't stopping there, Mr. President. Democrats also want taxpayers on the hook for generous new benefits for federal bureaucrats and government employees. Their bill would make Election Day a new paid holiday for government workers and create an additional brand new paid leave benefit for up to 6 days for any federal bureaucrat who decides they'd like to hang out at the polls during any election. Just what America needs, another paid holiday and a bunch of government workers being paid to go out and work. I assume our colleagues on the other side, on their campaigns. This is the Democrat plan to restore democracy? A brand new week of paid vacation for every federal employee who'd like to hover around while you cast your ballot? A Washington-based, taxpayer-subsidized clearinghouse for political campaign funding? A power grab that's smelling more and more like exactly what it is.
It is a power grab. It is basically looking to overturn the Constitution. It is looking to take the 10th Amendment and remove it from the Constitution or make it totally obsolete. As I said, we've done this before. The Reconstruction Amendments to the Constitution trampled upon the 10th. Trampled upon it. Basically telling the states they had no right to legislate, that the federal government would legislate on their behalf. This would take this a little bit further in saying, not only do you not legislate on your behalf because of the amendments that were passed back in the 1860s, we are now going to tell you that you cannot run your own elections anymore. We are going to run them at the federal level so that we can overturn the 10th Amendment and turn a constitutional republic into the most tyrannical form of government known to man, a democracy. Because there is no way to hold the majority accountable for their excesses. So what do we have with this? No purging of voter rolls, automatic voter registration, 16-year-olds eligible to vote. We already have illegal aliens voting for Democrats, so I'm sure they found a way to ensconce that. Federal holidays that allow federal government workers to hang out and do whatever they want for up to 6 days surrounding an election. What the... And this ethics nonsense? If you elect unethical people, you're going to have a problem with ethical behavior. There's no way you can legislate that away. And this won't do it either. Again, H.R. 1 is an attempt to legislate the Constitution away, starting with a piece of the Bill of Rights. Now, to his credit, Mitch McConnell says, we're not even going to talk about this in the Senate. To its credit, the administration has said, this is micromanaging. pretty much signaling that if it even got near the White House, it would probably not be signed. If you do not recognize that that they have just showed you the game plan for how they plan to make the 2018 election fraud look like a walk in the park, then you're really not paying attention. They've just shown you exactly how they plan to defeat Donald Trump. It's not by any of the clowns they currently have running. Those poor folks couldn't find their backsides with both hands. They are clueless. They are simply going to go and do what they did in Florida, in Broward County, in West Palm Beach County, and work on some corrupt superintendents of elections or the equivalent thereof, and take it. And if you allow them, you're going to end up with a quote-unquote Democrat Party president who is going to fast-track all the globalism that Donald Trump halted in its tracks when he became president. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinkin', will be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Let's talk about the dangerous Democrat female barrage of BS that has been coming our way since this new Congress has been sworn in. And actually, in some cases, even before the swearing in of the new Congress, it goes back to the midterm election last November. We are celebrating, if you're a Democrat, we have more diversity and everything. Okay, all the diversity, if you want to call it that, is primarily on the side of the Democrat Party. More women of color, more anti-Americanism. That is what they have welcomed into their party and put in front of the American people as the choice. You can go for, in their minds, the all-white, all-male, although that's not entirely the case, GOP representation that hates everybody who's not white and male also. Maybe a little bit of an overstatement, but that is what they put forward. Or you can go with us who are female and hip and young and socialist and anti-American and anti-Semitic. Oh, you're going too far. No, I'm not. Not at all. We got to go back and take a look at the three stars of our show with respect to women in the Democrat Party in Congress. Starting with Rashida Tlaib, who began, the night she won, she made it clear how anti-American she is.
But we begin with Rashida Tlaib, one of the newest members of Congress. Tlaib represents Michigan's 13th district, and she's already making nationwide news and even getting attention from the White House. Now, Tlaib is the daughter of Palestinian immigrants from southwest Detroit, and when she took the oath of office yesterday, Tlaib wasted no time going after President Trump. 7 Action News reporter Jim Kurtzer is live on the comments that went viral. Jim?
Keenan, Rashida Tlaib has gotten a lot of recognition as the first Palestinian American elected to Congress, but now it's her potty mouth that's getting her recognized and criticized, including by members of her own party.
Your son looks at you and says, "Mama, look, you won. Bullies don't win." And I said, "Baby, they don't, because we're going to go in there and we're going to impeach the."
That's a direct jab at President Trump, calling him an MFer during an event at MoveOn.org, a left-wing advocacy group in Washington. President Trump responding on Twitter, not directly at Tlaib, but saying, "How do you impeach a president who has won perhaps the greatest election of all time? Done nothing wrong. No collusion with Russia. It was the Dems that colluded and had the most successful 2 years of any president." Tlaib also taking to Twitter today saying, this is not just about Donald Trump, this is about all of us. In the face of this constitutional crisis, we must rise. She also tweeted this morning, I will always speak truth to power, hashtag unapologetically me. Top members of the Democratic Party are saying this is not appropriate.
I mean, I don't like that language. I wouldn't use that language. I don't, again, establish any language standards for my colleagues. But I don't think it's anything worse than what the president has said.
And take a look at this. This is this morning in Washington, D.C. Rashida Tlaib showing up at a public event, the media wanting her to comment on this. She avoids the media, leaving this event, even one of her aides getting in between her and the cameras so she didn't have to answer any of these questions. Expect the criticism to continue today from both sides of the aisle. She's taking a lot of heat for this potty mouth and comment about impeachment. Many members of Congress calling this premature and inappropriate. We'll have more reaction for you later today. Live in Southwest Detroit, Jim Kurtzner, 7 Action News.
So you come in as a Muslim, because that's what you are, and say we need to go impeach the president. For what? For what? Now, I don't want to put her out on an island, because the Clown Brown Caucus, also known as the Congressional Black Caucus, actually brought an impeachment vote to the floor in the last Congress. It got smoked in the House. It didn't go anywhere. Even the Democrats didn't vote for it. So she's no different than the anti-American Congressional Black Caucus. Yes, I said it. They are anti-American. Worse than anti-American, they're anti-black people. Why do I say that? Look at what has happened for black people since January 20th of 2017. Their unemployment rates have hit the lowest numbers on record. Their net worth is up. Their incomes are up. Their home ownership is up. And the only thing these guys can do is trash the president and call for him to be removed. So we could do what? Install Hillary so she could continue the Barack Obama policies, which had black unemployment much higher than it is now. Had an economy in the last year of Barack Obama grew at 1.6%. 1.6% GDP growth in the last year of Obama. And the year before that, if I recall correctly, it was 1.8%. Do you want to go back to that? Because what is your alternative to Donald Trump? Because Donald Trump, economic success and benefit to black people is not even questionable. You can't dispute it. And so now I have this Palestinian American, the first Palestinian American, really Palestinian. I wonder how Palestine feels about America. You mean the same Palestine that was taking U.S. aid and using it to reward those who committed crimes against Israeli Jews? That Palestine. So now she's a member of Congress, and we're supposed to be happy about that? I have no idea why I would be. I have no idea why I would be. And she says we need to go. She doesn't say anything about improving the lot of people anywhere. We just need to go impeach the MFer. Okay. That's dangerous discussion. Because let's assume that it even happens. Well, they impeached Bill Clinton for nothing. No, they impeached Bill Clinton for something. They impeached him for the wrong something, because they had gone after him for his ties to China. They probably could have gotten him removed. The Senate might have had to vote to get him out. But they went after him for sex. I remember one of the GOP House members being somewhat mystified at what they finally returned impeachment articles for. He said, we're not talking about treason? We're not talking about China? Therefore, he was still impeached on party lines, but that didn't go anywhere. It just didn't. But Tlaib has no real legislative agenda except to impeach the president. Has she said anything else? anything else surfaced in the news to have us know that she's a serious member of Congress? She's not a serious human being. She's not the only one, though. Because she's one of 2 Muslim females serving in the House of Representatives. And I believe this one shows that she was not going to use a Bible to be sworn in. I think she was sworn in on a Quran or something like that. And for those who do not know, and for those who do not believe, now about the do not know, I do care. About the do not believe, I do not. The Quran is incompatible with the U.S. Constitution. It is incompatible with the Declaration of Independence, which are both, particularly the Declaration of Independence, are both dependent upon, founded upon, truths found in, and reliant upon the truth of the Holy Bible. There is no truce. There is no middle ground. There is no common ground from an ideological standpoint between Islam and Christianity, between Islam and Americanism. Because Americanism does not talk about submit. Islam does. And if you think that they're not looking for you to submit to Allah, you're sadly mistaken. Not to mention, this woman does something very interesting. I've said this before and I'll repeat it. There are 2 nations on the face of this entire planet, only 2 that matter if you're discussing individual liberty. One is the United States of America, the other is the State of Israel. No other countries, if you're talking about individual liberty, no other countries come close to importance in that discussion. As the United States of America and the State of Israel go, so goes the discussion of individual liberty for anyone, anywhere on the planet. And the more you weaken it in the U.S. and Israel, then we're coming closer to that day that Abraham Lincoln felt was being defended by prosecuting the Civil War, that government of the people, by the people, and for the people should not perish from the earth. If you get rid of the U.S. and Israel, there'll be no government of, by, and for the people. It won't exist anywhere. I guarantee you. Nevertheless, this is what you hear from Ilhan Omar, or about her.
Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar tonight. Are you going to apologize? Refusing to answer questions about comments many in her own party are condemning as anti-Semitic. Remarks sparking a vote late today on a resolution condemning hate speech. Does she need to apologize?
Well, she may need to explain that she did not. It's up to her to explain, but I do not believe that she understood the full weight of the words.
Omar under fire for past tweets, including Israel has hypnotized the world, and saying U.S. politicians support Israel because it's all about the Benjamins, baby. She apologized for that, but then this comment last week.
I want to talk about the political influence in this country that says it is okay for people to push for allegiance to a foreign country.
Many Jewish Democrats outraged.
Jews have dual loyalty and can't be patriotic members of the country in which they live? Words matter.
The firestorm sparking a deep divide among House Democrats. Some progressives defending Omar, who's Somali American, pointing to anti-Muslim slurs against her, like this poster in West Virginia. Fellow freshman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeting, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and all bigotry serve the same ends. This conflict between younger progressive Democrats and leadership could get even more intense over issues like the Green New Deal and impeachment.
I'm not even going to talk about the Green New Deal. But in that piece, it did bring up the star of our show for dangerous Democrat females, not necessarily intelligent. Let me help you out. Of the 3, if you're talking about Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, if you're talking about those 3, the only one that seems to have a modicum of intelligence would be Tlaib. Ilhan Omar is just simply someone who's spouting rhetoric. And AOC is just someone who likes being in front of the camera, and she happens to be a committed socialist. There's no intelligence there. With Tlaib, there's a modicum of that. Not much. She has no judgment, but she's not lacking in intelligence. But over again to the star of our show, remember, she started out after first of all, she was shocked that she won the primary, which she should have been. And in that particular congressional district, whoever wins the primary, particularly if you're a Democrat, it was a done deal, because Republicans have no power in that congressional district. They have no representation. They got nothing. They don't really exist. So once she won the primary, she knew she was going. And she demonstrated very early on that she has no real true understanding of how the federal government works. She thought she was going to come in and maybe start signing legislation. That's not what Congress does. So I'm trying to figure out never mind. But some of the stuff that this woman does is just crazy. She's talked about hiking the marginal tax rate back up to 70%, forgetting that when it came down from 70%, it unleashed a torrent of economic activity during the Reagan years that took this nation out of double-digit inflation, double-digit unemployment, and double-digit federal interest rates. Nobody living now, particularly those who were born after they came down, can imagine what it would be like to live under double-digit federal interest rates. But Ronald Reagan got rid of that. Nevertheless, when Amazon sought to bring jobs to New York City and to her district or the community in which her district resides, she opposed it. And when Amazon said, you know what, it's not worth the fight, and they pulled out, opting instead to continue plans they have for other cities, well, she found herself rejoicing, it seems.
Amazon officially announced it will not be building an additional headquarters in New York. In a statement, the company said, quote, a number of state and local politicians have made it clear they oppose our presence and will not work with us. Amazon was planning to build a second headquarters in Long Island City, Queens. It says it will still proceed as planned to build headquarters in Virginia and a hub in Nashville. Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was a fierce critic of Amazon coming to New York. She called the news today incredible.
It shows that everyday Americans still have the power to organize and fight for their communities, and they can have more say in this country than the richest man in the world.
Of course, what the good Congresswoman left out is that the majority of people in that district, in her district, in New York City, wanted Amazon to be there. So it wasn't the common man who opposed them, it was the liberal man who did, and they were not the majority. But see, when you're a socialist, you believe your ideas are so powerful that they should be the majority, and when they win, it's supposedly a victory for everybody, even those who disagree. For those who think socialism can ever be a victory for anyone, I direct your gaze to Venezuela. This is just the start with her. And most recently, she's made ridiculous comments about the U.S. and even about Ronald Reagan, and I'm like, let's start with a comment about Ronald Reagan, basically tracing the problems that the U.S. has today with racism back to the stance and back to the Reagan administration. I'll play it and I'll let you figure it out.
I think a perfect example of how special interests and the powerful have pitted white working class Americans against brown and black working class Americans in order to just screw over all working class Americans is Reaganism in the 80s when he started talking about welfare queens. Mm-hmm. He's painting this like really resentful vision of essentially black women who were doing nothing, that were sucks on our country, right? That's not explicit racism, but still rooted in a racist caricature. It gives people a logical reason to say, oh yeah, no, toss out the whole social safety net.
Yeah.
Well, let's be clear. Ronald Reagan talked about the fact that there were people who were taking advantage of the social safety net. That is a reason for people who are trying to make ends meet by paying into it and supplying it to find that people who could work aren't working and taking advantage of their forced generosity to say maybe we need to get rid of this thing. Because if these folks can work, why the heck are we paying for them at all? The fact that they happen to be black, disproportionate to their percentage of the population, that's not on Reagan. It's not. So what do I do with this? Oh, by the way, here's why I call Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez anti-American.
I think all of these things sound radical compared to where we are, but where we are is not a good thing. And this idea of like 10% better from garbage shouldn't be what we settle for. It's like this, it feels like moderate is not a stance, it's just an attitude toward life of like,
That's her. That's anti-Americanism. Saying America, the greatest nation that has ever been on this planet, is garbage, and that we're 10% better than garbage. So what does that say about the rest of the world, particularly that part that you favor? So again, we have a hatred of the country in Rashida Tlaib. We have a hatred of both U.S. and Israel in Ilhan Omar. And you have anti-Americanism from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This dangerous Democrat female barrage of bull crap needs to be shut off. The only way to shut it off, you're not going to stop them from talking. But if they don't have political office, their words don't matter as much. I'm going to turn this over to my good friend Ron Edwards, and then we'll be back with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinking.
Sponsored by David E. Garrett Jewelers.
As a little boy growing up in Cleveland, I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of television. But once in a while, my dad and I would view the Three Stooges, Larry, Curly, and Moe, for laughs. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, today there's a new Three Stooges in Congress. Rashida Tlaib, who fights for Palestinian causes. Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, who doesn't support our values or good principles that made America the envy of the world. And there's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the big-time in her own mind socialist, who lets everyone know she's the boss. Unlike the original Three Stooges, the new congressional ones are a clear and present danger to our society, along with many others in Congress who are in government to accelerate America's decline and to bolster our enemies. The new Three Stooges support the destruction of our economy and Israel, along with forcing us to live without our unalienable rights and the denial of God-given right to life for newborn babies. And of course, trample President Trump. I think it's high time to disband government schools and restore authentic education. I'm Ron Edwards. Let's meet every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on AmericaMatters.us, SHR Media, and at 12 a.m. Sunday on Talk America Radio Network.
Ron Edwards, the new voice of America.
Sponsored by David E. Garrett Jewelers.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it's made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinkin on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, following on with the last segment from the first hour, I have the question, is the Islamist, or Islamic, I prefer Islamist, presence in the U.S. increasing? And I ask this question because of three news reports that I found, different sources, NBC, One America News, and Fox News Channel, on what's going on in America with respect to Muslims. So first, let's deal with what NBC found back in August of 2018 with respect to 11 children in New Mexico.
Watch your footing. There's a lot of holes and everything's covered.
Tanya and Jason Badger have been dealing with...
This is their bathroom, I guess.
...this since this winter. The Army veteran couple bought this 10-acre plot with the plan of building a getaway cottage.
I don't know if that's human feces or animal ones.
Instead, it's been turned into a third-world-looking compound hiding just south of the Colorado-New Mexico border. And the discoveries on the lot...
brutal fight enders. That's promising.
...are chilling.
Lots of bullet casings.
There's bullet casings in there.
A shooting range in the back, shattered glass fence in the front, mini crayons scattered about, and live ammunition.
One detail that was not released initially by the Taos County Sheriff's is that there was a 150-foot escape tunnel in this compound. This hole here goes into the earth 150 feet. There's a ladder at the end of this, and the owners say they believe it could be used as an escape route.
Cross another property line, and you'll find the exit to that tunnel. 11 kids were living in these conditions for months. The landowners say Lucas Morton and Siraj Wahaj mistakenly set up camp on their lot sometime after Christmas. They owned the lot directly behind the Badgers' land, and for months they've been either trying to sell their land or kick them out. All attempts have failed. But to the Badgers, their land is the less important concern.
Where else could he, if he's not with them, where is he?
Abdul Kahani Wahaj is the 3-year-old boy that police say was abducted from his home in Georgia at the beginning of December. Police have arrested his father on suspicion of child abduction, but the little boy...
It's not fair. You know, kids can't fight for themselves.
...is still nowhere to be found. From Taos County, Ryan Laughlin, KOB Eyewitness News 4.
3-year-old kid taken from his home in Georgia, winds up in New Mexico with his father, apparently, at an Islamic compound in rural New Mexico. Well, what does that have to do with Islamic presence in America? What does that prove? Okay, we have something here. What even makes you think that those guys, that whole thing with those children had anything to do with anything important? Well, here's a Fox News report that gives you some information about what happened as that story kind of rounded out. You start with the folks finding stuff on their land. You learn that the 11 children were there, and you find out that the 11 children have kind of disappeared. Well, they weren't disappeared for long.
Now, we have some horrifying new revelations out of rural New Mexico and that horrible case there that the media are not showing you. According to the most recent evidence, the Wahaj family has been using their compound as a terrorist training camp for the 11 children they were holding. Agents found these handwritten letters titled Phases of a Terrorist Attack, which detail the steps to a successful suicide attack in the name of Allah. Yes, in the United States of America. Despite all that, a judge in New Mexico today decided to release 3 of the 5 defendants, ruling that authorities violated the state's 10-day rule. How do you botch that? Andy McCarthy's back with us on Thoughts, and I'm so glad you stayed, Andy, because this also has an interesting connection to the case that you worked on for the 93 World Trade Center bombing. We're going to get to that in a moment. But explain how we could get to this place where 3 of the 5 defendants are released.
Well, Laura, they made these arrests a couple of weeks ago, and I guess they've been investigating since, and they've gotten to the point where they either have to charge them in an indictment or go through what they call a probable cause or a preliminary hearing. And what I sense happened was they decided that 2 of these characters were the ringleaders, and they appear to have ratcheted up the charges on the 2 of them, and then decided perhaps that they couldn't make the case on the other 3, so they didn't go forward on those. That doesn't mean that they can't at some future time indict them, but that seems unlikely to me.
Well, and are they, I guess it doesn't matter if they're a flight risk because they're not charged with anything. But that's the concern, obviously.
Yeah,
that
well,
right?
Right. They had already been sprung on bail to begin with, which was, I think, in some ways more outrageous than what happened today. Because if what happened today is just because they didn't have enough evidence on these 3 to go forward, that's one thing. But letting any of them out, I think, is insane.
Now, can you explain
you're going to charge?
No, the whole thing drives. This whole case was so hideous. What was done to those children, 1 dead. But Andy, explain your connection. I've got a minute left to this case in the '93 World Trade Center bombing.
Laura, the father of the ringleader runs a fairly notorious mosque in Brooklyn. His name is also Siraj Wahaj, and that mosque hosted the blind sheikh, who I prosecuted in the early 1990s in connection with the World Trade Center bombing and a plot to bomb New York City landmarks. He actually appeared, that is the elder Siraj Wahaj, as a character witness for the defendants in the trial. So we're seeing, a guy who was enmeshed in this ideology back when, and here you have the results of it.
Yeah, and we're welcoming this into the United States, apparently, and then releasing people back into the system. I don't have a good feeling about this at all. Andy McCarthy, thank you so much for your insights, as always. So appreciated.
All right, I can hear it already. All right, Stan, this is terrible. Couple buys some land, and they find an encampment on it, and it looks bad, and looks like there were 11 kids there, and when you first started, you can't find the kids, and now you fast forward, and they found the kids, and they arrested people for child molestation and child endangerment. 1 of the children are dead. Wow. And they charged 2 of them, released 3 of them, but all 5 were able to post bail when 11 children had been molested and 1 had been killed? What? Okay, I get it. All that's bad. And all that doesn't speak well of Islam, although, it's only 5 guys. You can't really say that. That whole connection back to the blind sheikh from the bombing of the World Trade Center back in 1993. Man, it's a long time ago. But I'm not exactly seeing how this is showing that there's a problem with Islamism or the Islamic people in America. Well, that's where you go over to a report from One American News that kind of ties the whole thing together.
And a recent report sheds light on FBI documents confirming dozens of Islamic compounds are operating right here in the U.S. One America's Christian Rose has that story.
The FBI confirms at least 22 Islamic compounds are operating across the U.S., potentially preparing terror attacks and acts of violence. That's according to a recent report from Washington-based Clarion Project. The new evidence comes after a recent discovery of a terror compound in New Mexico, and FBI documents suggest such camps could become a tool of political terror ahead of this year's midterms.
We have training camps growing where they want to kill us. Mm-hmm. That's my question. When can we get rid of them?
We're going to be looking at a lot of different things. And, a lot of people are saying that, and a lot of people are saying that bad things are happening out there. We're going to be looking at that and plenty of other things.
The existence of such compounds had been dismissed by the Washington Post back in 2015 as a conspiracy theory. But the FBI said a group called Jamaat al-Fuqra, or Muslims of America, runs a network of terror camps. The FBI also said such compounds are located in secluded areas of rural America, including in Florida, New York, and California.
The leader of the group, he's a former member of the Pakistani military. His father was one of the founding fathers. He has great connections to the Pakistani intelligence, the ISI.
The FBI believes Muslims of America is armed and dangerous and has ties to Al-Qaeda, including the people responsible for the 9/11 attacks in New York. And the most recent shooting in Florida, a key swing state in the upcoming midterms, suggests Islamic compounds might be taking active part in influencing U.S. politics. Meanwhile, the Democrat Party, which some say has a favorable view of America's Muslim entities, rushed to what some believe is politicizing the shooting yet another time, advancing its gun control agenda.
I think we are going to have to really search our souls and get to the point of saying enough is enough.
The DOJ said it is investigating several members of Muslims of America on gun-related charges. But the State and Treasury Departments are facing calls to designate Muslims of America a terror group to curb their operations in the U.S. and overseas. Meanwhile, several members of Muslims of America are running for Congress, including the group's General Counsel Tahira Amatul Wadud of Massachusetts. Christian Rose, One American News.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe.
The interesting thing there is if you talk about Muslims of America running for office, running for Congress, one of the people who was shown in the video that accompanied that audio is Rashida Tlaib. For those of you who do not know, Muslims have a specific concentration in the state of Minnesota and in a couple of areas in the state of Michigan. Dearborn, Michigan has been, basically called Dearbornistan. It's been taken over. Is that bad? Is that good? Well, when you can't speak openly of Christianity in any place in America, which was founded on Christian principles, because of the presence of Muslims in the area, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing at all. And now you find that they've gone from just taking over areas to putting folks in Congress. People like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, who are clearly not pro-American. And if you're affiliated with the Muslims of America, you are someone who does want to see this nation fall. Is that a problem for anyone other than me? I think so. I think it's a problem, period. So while you are reeling from someone calling you an Islamophobe, I want you to think about those kids. I want you to think about those 22 camps that the FBI noted prior to the midterms that were set up in rural areas to reduce the likelihood of detection. And they were teaching people specifically, and children, how to be good terrorists here in the United States. If that doesn't alarm you, then it doesn't alarm you. If it does alarm you, I'm going to tell you to do something different than what a Democrat would say. A Democrat would say, go out and vote. I would say go out and protect your vote. There are several ways that you need to do that. One, you need to cast it, but you need to make sure that when it is cast, that it is counted the same way that you cast it. That's not what happened this past November. Many examples of why you can make that statement, including the fact that there are no GOP members of Congress from Orange County, California, even though the Republican gubernatorial candidate won Orange County. He won Orange County, but then you're saying that everybody split their vote after the governor's race to choose a Democrat. Doesn't make sense. So casting your vote and then going home and believing everything's going to be okay, that's not going to work. You're going to have to protect your vote by any means necessary. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us, also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida, Talk Radio Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. When you're looking at the Democrats who are running for the nomination in 2020, there's something that is for me becoming crystal clear. There's no American message. There's something they want America to become, but there's not an American message here. They don't like America the way it is currently constructed. They don't like America the way it has always been constructed. They want something different, and that difference would result in America being something other than what she has always been. Let me give you a great example. Governor John Hickenlooper of Colorado appeared on MSNBC. That's the first thing you know where we're not talking about anything really American. But he spoke with Joe on, what is Joe's last name? I can't even remember. On the Morning Joe program on MSNBC, he spoke with their host, and he was asked a series of questions. Well, basically a series of questions around a simple theme as to whether or not he, as a successful businessman, supported capitalism. And listen to this answer.
For American capitalism, were you concerned about some factions of your party embracing socialism?
Well, I think the Democratic Party is a big tent. And that's one of the things I've always loved about the Democratic Party is there are all kinds of ideas. You know, I look at my experiences and where I've tried to make a difference, and it really is getting people together, getting them to lay down their weapons, and then getting stuff done. And the labels, I think most Democrats don't care as much about the labels.
Well, would you call yourself a proud capitalist?
Oh, I don't know. Again, the labels, I'm not sure any of them fit. But I do believe that, that ability to look at, climate change and figure out how are we really going to create a sense of urgency and get people together. What we did with methane is one of the worst climate pollutants that there is. And, we're the first state and so far the only state to really address it aggressively.
Right. Let me ask you just, I'll break it down even more. Do you consider yourself a capitalist?
Well, again, the labels, I'm a small business person, so that part of the system that you would call capitalist, I get it. I understand it. I worked very hard. When you open your own business, when we first signed the lease in lower downtown Denver to build our brew pub, it was $1 per square foot per year. I mean, that is, if you haven't ever signed one of those leases, that rent is almost free. And it reflects how bad and how abandoned that part of the community was. We worked 70, 80, 90 hours a week to build the business, and we worked with the other business owners in lower down to help them build their business. Is that capitalism? I guess. I mean, sure. So in that sense of building community, that's one way to do it, one aspect of it. It's not all that it is, right? I served on 42 nonprofit boards and committees in that same 12-year period.
Right. Well, so do you consider yourself a capitalist, and does capitalism work?
Well, I think I don't look at myself.
Get out the top hat, the cane, and the dancing shoes. I mean, how about not giving a straight answer? it's hilarious to me when you think about it. How are you trying to put yourself out there? You're someone who made his money as a capitalist, and now all of a sudden that you're in politics, you want to start talking about laying down weapons. When someone asks you if you're a proud capitalist, your first answer is to laugh? Something's wrong here. Capitalism built America. Slave labor didn't build America. Capitalism did. Well, let's move over to someone who's a little bit more established than Mr. Hickenlooper, at least in Washington, D.C. circles. And that would be Kamala Harris. And this is her talking about climate change and what needs to be done.
It is a fact that we can change human behaviors without much change to our lifestyle, and we can save the future generations of our country and this world. But there has been a failure to do that because this administration and the people who are a part of it are in the pockets of big oil and are denying what we know is a reality around greenhouse gas emissions and what we need to do to curb those, what we need to do to focus on the fact that water is a precious resource. And we can be smarter about policy that also is about creating jobs, to invest in renewable energy. Some good work is happening in this state. Solar, wind turbines, all of that. We need a new president.
That poor woman spent the better part of a minute just fishing around for an applause line, and when she got it, she looked like she was exhausted. She was at the end. If that hadn't come through, I don't know what she would have done. Climate change is not a threat, never has been. The same people who are talking about it's going to be too warm now were telling us in the 1970s there was going to be an ice age, and been telling us, predicting doom and gloom for the world since 1970s. And the world's still here, and the world still seems to be functioning pretty much the way it has always functioned. They're talking about temperatures warming, and NASA's telling us about solar minimums of an order that the last time they could detect that such a thing would have occurred would have been the Little Ice Age back about 500 years ago. So, I'm sorry. She's out there talking about, we're going to get all these jobs. From where? China tried that. Germany tried that. They didn't get any jobs out of it. It's not happening. And it's not an American message to basically tell people how they're supposed to live. We can change people's behaviors without changing. Really? That sounds like a direct assault on individual liberty. You can have the lifestyle you want as long as you live the way we choose. Let's move on to Pocahontas, or Liwatha, as I like to call her, Elizabeth Warren. She has a plan that sounds more substantive than anything we just heard from Mr. Hickenlooper or Ms. Kamala Harris. But at the end of it, there's nothing American about it either.
Tonight, presidential hopeful Senator Elizabeth Warren is targeting big tech. She says companies like Amazon, Google, and Facebook have gotten just too big, and it's time to break them up. So is that even possible? KPIX's Lynn Ramirez is in Silicon Valley tonight.
Well, there's no question that these tech companies are dominating their industries. But the question is, does it rise to the level of an abuse of dominance or a monopoly? That's a question voters could be facing in the 2020 election.
What was once a love affair with big tech companies may now be heading towards a bitter breakup. Senator Elizabeth Warren has a plan to cut up the biggest companies, limit their size, and stop them from taking over smaller rivals, saying, quote, today's tech companies have too much power over our economy, our society, and our democracy.
Do you think tech companies are too big? Absolutely. I mean, they're too powerful.
Homeless advocate Pastor Scott Wagers says Google's San Jose expansion is one example of a company's dominance having negative effects, in this case, housing.
And look what's happening here. People are not getting out of poverty and homelessness, but the tech companies are becoming even more powerful the way they swayed San Jose.
But is the breakup of these tech giants even possible? Yes, according to Santa Clara University antitrust law professor Donald Polden, but it would not be easy.
You have a problem here adjusting how you take out the bad
while remaining the creative, the innovative, the new product, the new thing of the future.
CNET editor Ian Schuer says tech companies have enjoyed decades of practically doing what they please without much U.S. government regulation. But if this issue catches on in the 2020 election, those days could be over.
The tech industry is going through a really tough time with the United States government right now.
But one Silicon Valley leader says let the marketplace decide if tech companies have too much power.
Let's let consumers choose, not a political candidate looking for headlines.
In San Jose, Len Ramirez, KPIX5.
And there you have it. Why don't you let the market decide? Why is it that you have so little faith in the people that you figure that you must break up something that is, well, are you finding it harmful? Why? Because it oppresses those who are right of center politically? That can't be Elizabeth Warren's reason. Well, they're just too big. What does that mean? Too big for what? There's no competition. If you really understood anything about technology, what you would recognize is that size is no guarantee of success. All these companies that get acquired, Facebook was there before they bought these companies. Amazon was there before they bought these companies. And some of these companies are bought and they find out they're not what they thought they were and they go away. Other companies come. The issue is innovation. And as soon as you decide to tell people how much they can amass in terms of resources, then you're going to kill innovation and you're going to kill the tech sector. How's that going to help anybody? So I have people who want to get rid of tech. I have people who want to revisit failed policies on quote-unquote green jobs. And I have people who don't want to acknowledge that capitalism is even good. This is your Democrat Party. This is who wants to run your country. If we were talking Sweden, if we were talking Venezuela, if we were talking Norway, if we were talking North Korea, maybe this would be good. But it's not good for the United States of America. Not in any way, shape, or form. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5, North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. WLBB, News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Now stop me if you've heard this one before. A cop, usually or preferably a white cop, confronts a black criminal. The criminal chooses to disregard lawful commands from the cop, which causes what could be handled simply to escalate into a very tense situation. It becomes so tense that the criminal is shot and killed. Well, predictably, the criminal's mama says that the cop was wrong, and the criminal, who was more than likely out on bond, awaiting trial, or on probation, if he was awaiting trial, misses their trial or fails to see their parole officer that last time. This particular movie has more remakes than Rocky. And it's happened again. This time in Little Rock, back on the 22nd of February, Bradley Blackshire ran afoul of police, and on the 7th of March, Little Rock affiliate KARK filed this report once the police released their preliminary finding.
We are back with breaking news. As we mentioned at the top of the newscast, so we were awaiting the release of critical incident video from the February officer-involved shooting that killed the suspect. We now have that video just in the last few minutes. KARK 4's Mitch McCoy rejoins us live at police headquarters. Mitch, can you describe this video to us?
Yeah, Mallory, good afternoon. This is, like the mayor said, one of those videos that will invoke emotion, whether you're pro-police, anti-police, whatever your viewpoint is. Take a listen to this video. This was just released. It's the critical incident video. It's about 25 minutes long. This is just a clip of that video that was released on the department's social media account. We want to give you a fair warning. The video you're about to see is graphic, and this is what was just released on the department's social media video. This is a clip of that video from the department's dash camera.
Dude, get out of the car. Get out of the car. He's refusing to get out of the car. Dude, get out of the car. Get out of the car. Get out of the car. Get out of the car, dude. Turn right there. Get out of the car. Put your hands up. Put your hands up. I need you to say anything.
Multiple shots being fired, and you hear that officer telling Bradley Blackshire, the 30-year-old man that died at that scene, to get out of the car. Police told us at the scene that car was a stolen vehicle that they had been tracking. And so that is, again, just a clip, short clip of a 25-minute long video released by the Little Rock Police Department just within the last few moments. We are still going through all of this video. We'll have it for you on our website at krk.com, and we will continue to go through and dive through this 25-minute video. And we'll have another update coming up tonight on KRK4 News at 5. But for now, we're live at police headquarters. Mitch McCoy, KRK4 News.
Oh, Mitch, thank you. And it is hard to watch due to the nature of the video. We are not showing that entire video on the air. You can watch the full-length video right now on your phone. We do want to warn you, it is graphic. Viewer discretion should be advised, but that is available at KARK.com, a story we will continue to follow.
It is a 25-minute video. I watched all of it. I was not disturbed by the officer's actions. I was more surprised by the actions of the man who got killed. Nevertheless, let's move on to something interesting. This same affiliate, KARK in Little Rock, ran a story the day after the shooting occurred where they put the crying mother on TV. I'm not exactly sure what that could possibly do except be a grab or a play for ratings, because crying mothers get killer ratings. Pardon the use of that term. And of course, now I will say this for the mother. She doesn't necessarily give her son that much of a pass, but I'm not exactly sure you're expecting a crying mother to ever find the police in the right when her son gets killed. So the purpose of doing this is what?
I mean, who does that? The first couple of shots killed him. Why did they have to do that to my baby?
Very emotional tonight. A family is pleading for answers. Bradley Blackshire was shot and killed by a Little Rock police officer on Friday in what LRPD is calling a justified shooting. Tonight, friends and family held a vigil and balloon release in honor of the place where he died. It happened in the parking lot of the Pro Barber at the corner of 12th Street and Canis Road on Rodney Parham. You see a map of it right there. LRPD says Officer Charles Stark was on patrol when he saw a car listed as stolen. Officer Starks attempted to pull over that car and asked Bradley Blackshire to get out. Police say that when Blackshire began to drive forward, Officer Starks fired his gun, hitting Blackshire. We're told officers tried to save him at the scene. Starks is now on administrative leave. Tonight, dozens of people in the community met where that shooting happened. Blackshire's mother, Kim, says she thinks that shooting could have been prevented and that her son would still be here today.
You took my baby. You took my son. You took my only son. He's not going to have a chance to tell his story, but we're going to make sure that his story gets out.
Blackshire says she hasn't heard from Little Rock police and plans to hire an attorney. That shooting is still under investigation tonight.
I wonder if the story that his mother plans to get out includes the fact that he was driving a stolen car. I wonder if the story that his mother plans to put out about her son includes the fact that he was out, I'm assuming on bail, because he was awaiting trial on drug trafficking charges. I wonder if the story she plans to put out includes what is it that would make her son believe that driving through a police officer whose gun is drawn and pointed at him represents anything resembling a good idea. I wonder if that will be part of the story of her son that she plans to make known. I doubt it. We've seen this movie. We've seen it, I don't know how many times. Going all the way back to 2012 and before, if you want to go back before that, but it started to become a thing with the death of Trayvon Martin. And every black man who is shot by somebody who is not black or killed by somebody who is not black, particularly if that person is a police officer, is in need of justice. And now in California, the officers who took down Stephon Clark, the news came out that they would not be charged. That's a decision with which I concur. But I live in California, and what happens next was predictable.
California legislators are exploring ways to make police liable for the deaths related to the use of lethal force. This comes after investigators concluded that the officers who shot and killed Stephon Clark last year did not commit a crime. Clark was unarmed at the time of his death. Meg Oliver has more.
From Sacramento City Council to its streets, shouts of Stephon Clark have pitted police against the community. The shooting death of 22-year-old Clark by Sacramento police last year and other high-profile shootings of unarmed black men have also pivoted elected officials to introduce legislation to make police criminally liable for such deaths.
Most of the officers are not being prosecuted for the use of lethal force. And so California would be among the first state to actually implement a statewide policy.
Racist police! As the proposal is considered, separate investigations from the Sacramento County District Attorney and California's Attorney General concluded the officers did not violate protocol.
Our investigation has concluded that no criminal charges against the officers involved in the shooting can be sustained.
Clark had been pursued by a police helicopter for car break-ins when two officers chased him into his grandparents' backyard the night of March 18, 2018. In a statement to investigators, the officer said, "I was scared. I thought that he had shot at me. A split-second flash from Clark's cell phone was misinterpreted as gunfire. I saw what I believed to be a metallic reflection or muzzle flash, something coming at me." Increasingly, law enforcement is coming up with solutions to de-escalate encounters that could go bad in a split second.
Criminalizing the police officer for doing their job is not the way to go.
In California alone, more than 700 use-of-force police incidents analyzed by the Department of Justice show almost half of them involve discharge of a gun. The Peace Officers Association of California is advocating a proposed law to enhance training.
The situations leading up to these use of force are basically what we need to address, and that's mental health, substance abuse, and these situations. They're more than 90% have that component to them. And how do we address that to lower the use of those use of force?
But the message from Black Lives Matter is straight to the point. They plan to protest outside the Sacramento Police Department until the officers are fired or face serious consequences. Meg Oliver, CBS News, Sacramento, California.
So Black Lives Matter has finally become more effective. You have to understand what their objective was. It was never to save black people from being shot by police. The number of black people shot by police numbers less than 200 every year. The number of black people murdered by other black people, numbers more than 7,000 every year. Every year. If you were trying to save black people from being shot, armed, unarmed, innocent, guilty, whatever, then you would be turning your attention to that which kills more than 7,000, more so than you would pay attention to that which kills between 150 and 200. That's what you would be doing. But if you're not doing that, that tells me something about your agenda. Clearly that you have one. They didn't bother to tell you that in addition to other things, we find out that, and that's why the whole thing about substance abuse is coming out, is that, Stephon Clark had cocaine, marijuana, and codeine in his system at the time of his death. Dude was high. Well, that shouldn't matter. It does matter, because people who are high, their ability to be reasoned and rational is impaired. And now what you want is, in a life and death situation, or what could be a life and death situation, you want the police officer to take all that into account. And you want to actually hold him liable if you don't like his decision because you're playing Monday morning quarterback. This is ridiculous. Well, what about all these people who are dying? I'm going to say this as kindly as I can. I don't care. And let me tell you what I mean when I say I don't care. Stephon Clark, you're running from the cops, you go into the backyard, it's dark, and you point something at police officers, and I guess you're trying to take a picture, and you send off a flash at people who are pointing a gun at you. And you expect what to occur? For them to basically say cheese? No, sir, it's not going to happen. Bradley Blackshire, you're pulled over. Well, you were already stopped, but a cop comes up to you, blocks your car partially, gets out of his vehicle, comes up to you, gun drawn, and says, get out of the car. And you tell him no and attempt to drive over him, and you thought this was going to end how? Please explain to me how anybody would think that it would end differently or that it should. Let's go back. Michael Brown. You tried to take a police officer's gun, and then you hit him. You assault the police officer, try to take his gun, and then once you're both outside of the car, you charge at him, and you think you're not going to get shot. Wow. Eric Garner, a case with which I have many problems on the police side. You've been arrested 30 times in your 43 years on the planet, and you honestly think when the NYPD tells you you're going in, that's something that you're going to be able to debate with them? Dude, I don't believe they should have choked him out. But, dude, when the cops have you outnumbered and say that you're going in, you're going. And you've been arrested 30 times? You know the drill. You can go through all the other ones. Tamir Rice. My question about Tamir Rice is, who dropped a dime on a 12-year-old with a fake gun? Who does that? Because whoever called it in said they thought the gun was fake. Who does that? I'm done with having sympathy for the Black Lives Matter agenda. I'm done with any sympathy I would have considered having for people getting shot because someone did something stupid. Tamir Rice didn't do something stupid, but some idiot called in a 12-year-old with a fake gun and thought that was the right thing to do. See, and that's probably somebody black, and probably somebody who doesn't trust the police, but you're calling the police on a kid with a gun, and it's not even a real gun, and you don't even think it's a real gun. And what's the outcome? When I say Black Lives Matter has finally succeeded, you have police organizations saying, well, we really need to train and train and train. What you're training people to do is to die. You're training police officers to die in the line of duty, but there'll be no less dead. Well, they have to learn how to de-escalate. You know what? Who's going to train these criminals? Who's going to train these people who can't figure out how to follow lawful commands from police officers. You know what? That's a bigger and better education project. Why don't I teach people not to be idiots when they are dealing with the police? Teach them, how do you deal with the police? You do what the officer says. What if he's a corrupt officer? He has a gun, dude. Do you? And if you pull a gun on a cop, how do you think that's going to turn out? But what you're going to do is you're going to get the cops to train for all these situations, and you're going to create that split second of hesitation that's going to get more and more cops killed. And that's their goal. Because the idea is to create an ungovernable situation. You can't police. Because if you pull your gun, you're going to jail. If you shoot somebody, you're going to jail. It doesn't matter whether or not what you did was reasonable. You now have to be held accountable because someone died, which in and of itself is saying you do not want policing. You definitely don't want aggressive policing. Let's remember what happened in Baltimore when you decided to charge 6 officers for some nonsense and you couldn't even get them convicted of jaywalking, let alone anything connected to Freddie Gray's murder. And when you failed to convict them, matter of fact, when you charged them and knowing that you had no case, the murder rate in Baltimore skyrocketed until you had more murders in Baltimore than you had in New York City, a location that is 13 times the population of Baltimore. That is the Black Lives Matter agenda. Some of you may have seen the young stupid black woman who showed up on a Fox panel show where they had a town hall type situation where she was saying we need to get the police out of the community. In Chicago she's talking about. We need to get rid of the police and we'll take care of it ourselves. Really? Yeah, that's what gangs do. They take care of it themselves. You cool with that? And if you are, what the heck is wrong with you? When you look at what's going on the left side of the political spectrum in America, you'll find Black Lives Matter. You'll find people like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. You'll find Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You'll find all these people who have one thing in common with their ideology and their belief system. It is that the way of liberty is wrong. Let me repeat that. Their common belief centers around the idea that individual liberty is wrong. Because Medicare for all is not consistent with individual liberty. Forcing one person to pay for another person's education is not an expression of individual liberty. And we know exactly what socialism does. We know exactly what socialism is. We know exactly what socialism is about. That's what you have going on here. This is what your country is turning toward, at least for those on the left. And they are going for it. Let me make sure you understand. They are not hemming and hawing. They're not pussyfooting around. They are going for it. The Green New Deal, going for it. Telling cops they need to be criminally liable if somebody dies, no matter the circumstances, they're going for it. Bringing back a 70% marginal tax rate, they're going for it. And if you do not oppose them, your country will end. Well, we did all this before. You don't understand. Your country will end. Because that is their goal. and they now have more weapons, more momentum than they've had previously. The only thing that has slowed their roll is that Hillary Clinton was not elected. It's that simple. If Hillary Clinton had been elected, we'd be well down the road. Life would continue to be cheap because infanticide would be an accepted thing in the land. And if you opposed it, you would be looking at the resources of the federal government to imprison you or worse. So when you look at all this stuff, remember, all this stuff, all the pro-abortion, all the Black Lives Matter, all the claims of Islamophobia, all the nonsense about diversity, all this BS is centered around one thing and one thing only. If we can get you to accept the Green New Deal and all this other nonsense, you will end America. You will end it. And that is their goal. You don't have to believe me. You're watching it happen. And if you choose to close your eyes to it, that is your prerogative. It just doesn't change what's happening. And that's our show. May God bless and God keep you. It's my prayer. And I definitely hope that you are ready and willing to do what is required to keep yourself in liberty, not only during your lifetime, but to teach the methods of maintaining liberty to your children so that they can teach it to their children and maintain liberty in their lifetime. That's all that matters. And until next week, do take care.
You've been listening to Black Man Thinkin' with your host, Stan Levy. Join Stan midnight to 2 a.m. That's late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. And find him on the web at Black Man Thinkin' without the G. That's blackmanthinkin.com.